Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Today I want to talk to you about how to survive after a collapse. What do you do after it happens? This is very important because you can be as prepared as you want to be, as you can be. You can be ready for it to happen, but then once it happens, well, that's when the rubber hits the road. And you want to be ready for those things to happen, the bad things, the scary things, the things that are out of your control. And so depending on what is going on, depending on what kind of collapse or crisis, it's going to kind of vary in what you're going to do. So I want to cover that. We'll talk about what to do in the first 24 hours, what to do in the first 3 to 5 days, what to do in the first couple of weeks, and what to do in the first couple of months, or how to react and how it's going to affect you. Now, obviously, it's going to be different for different scenarios, and I can't cover everything. So a lot of what I'm going to cover is just in very general terms to kind of help you get an idea of what to expect and what you need to get ready for things like a nuclear war, World War III, massive economic collapse, hyperinflation, crashing dollar, civil war, an EMP, grid down failure, complete cyber attack of the system. There's a lot of massive possibilities, the big ones that are looming right now that a lot of us are thinking about. Some of them may be more likely than others, but they're still in the back of our minds. So I wanted to talk about that today, and just some of the things that we can do to get ready, both physically and mentally, because as we know, that mental preparedness in a lot of ways is the most important. So let's get going with that. The first 24 hours after a major catastrophic event actually might be one of the most important time periods for you to be ready after something happens. A lot of people might not think that because in that first 24 hours, depending on the scenario, things might be pretty normal. A lot of people might not even know, even if there was a nuclear attack on, say, the West Coast, people in a lot of parts of the country in the first 24 hours, they may not even know that. Not everyone watches the news and stays on top of events. So in that first 24-hour period, it's quite possible that for the most part, life in America and in your community is going to seem fairly normal. There'll be a few people and it'll start to pick up. But this is the time period that for those of us as preppers that are aware of this kind of stuff, that's a dangerous area where we realize what's just happened. We realize that this is really bad and how bad this is going to be. And it's possible that some people could panic. And we need to not do that. We need to make sure we keep our wits about us. And during that first 24-hour period, do not panic, even if you know how bad this is, the event is and how bad it's going to be. Utilize that time to get yourselves ready. If things are fairly normal in your community, you might be able to make one last run to the store and stock up on things, withdraw the money out of the bank, fill up gas cans. That is well within the realm of possibility in the first 24 hours, depending on the scenario. If that's not the case, you certainly want to be home and calmly getting everything ready, going over it with your spouse, and okay, this is what we've planned for. This is how things are going to be. We're locking things down. We're shutting down. Maybe depending on the scenario, if there's no electricity, what's your plan for doing without electricity? If banks have shut down, if the internet has shut down, communications have shut down. If it's a nuclear potential for nuclear fallout, what is your protocol for getting ready for that? Sealing off the house, whatever it is. That first 24-hour period is very critical, and so don't allow yourself to panic. That's certainly not what we want to do. That's why we're prepared. That's why we do the things that we do, so that we don't panic when something happens. So make sure you use that first 24-hour period to the fullest to really get yourself ahead of the game of everyone else, because here real soon, the rest of the world's going to realize what's happened, and then that's when they will panic, and you need to be ahead of the curve and ready to go before that happens. So in the first 3 to 5 days, that's when things are going to start to get crazy. You're gonna have the first time that people are really going to start panicking. She doesn't want to be held. You're going to have people that are really starting to sink in finally that the end has come, that an emergency has happened, that it's chaos, it's catastrophe. And so that's going to be very critical, those first 3 to 5 days. So that's something that you really need to kind of get yourself ready for, of how to react to that, because you don't want to find yourself reacting the same way that, well, all the masses do. You want to pretty much have yourself ready to kind of lock down. If that's the case, if that's what your plan is to lock down, you want to have enough of your supplies ready, perimeter security, whatever it is. You want to start by the time the third and fifth day hit. You want to kind of have that down, because as people start to realize that more of what's happened, there's going to be more panic, and when that panic happens, what's going to happen is things are going to start drying up real fast. Sorry, the dogs just won't leave me alone. You're going to start seeing the food supplies, local food supplies in your community dry up pretty fast. And that first 3 to 5 days, grocery stores could completely be bone dry. Fuel supplies locally could be completely gone in 3 to 5 days. And depending on the scenario, there may not be trucks running to fill those up. So in that first 3 to 5 days, that's when, again, depending on the scenario, when things are going to start to really set in, that reality where people are going to realize that there's no food coming back, and the stores are running out, and there's no gasoline. And you're going to start to see the early signs of civil unrest. People may start protesting. They may gather outside of government buildings demanding something to be done. There could be little scuffles by that time in grocery stores and stuff, where people are kind of fighting over the last bits of food. And so you're going to start seeing that ready by that time. So in other words, that's the time period you don't want to be out on the street. From by the third day, you should be ready to go within your property, on your homestead, so that you no longer have to be out on the street, at least for a while, because from this point on, things are going to start getting a little crazy. So remember that by the 3rd to 5th day, you certainly don't want to be out running around with all the other people that have becoming panicked and more aggressive out on the street. 2 weeks have gone by now since the big bang, the big boom, the balloon popped, and things are getting crazy now. It's become well obvious to everyone that collapse has happened. So we're at a stage now that there's not really anyone left that doesn't know that something major's happened. There may be still some that are hopeful that things are going to very quickly turn around and that help is coming. But in our scenario, that's not necessarily the case, because we have gone through a major catastrophic event, whatever it is, that's going to be at least medium term, but most likely a long-term collapse. And so people are starting to get upset, and we're starting to see violence in the streets. We're not quite to the point of cannibalism, but we're certainly seeing an increase of violence. Looting has been going on probably for anywhere from 3 days to a week now, on a fairly regular basis. Violence against people and violence against the vulnerable, women, children, elderly, disabled, is now happening on a more regular basis. And the reason for that is because your social services, community services, law enforcement, fire departments and stuff are becoming pretty spread thin. And some of them have walked off the job. And in some places, they just may not exist altogether. And so while government from a federal level may still be in control, on the local level, it's really strained, and it's going to be sparse, and it's going to be not as available as you once were used to it, and maybe at all. And if it is, the response times are pretty long, and they're probably only responding to the worst kinds of emergencies. And so because of that, people are it's starting to get bad. People are getting hungry, and there's constantly fighting and looting over the food, because, you know, in our scenario, probably most likely the last resupplies from the big trucks into the local grocery stores has already happened a week ago. And so we're dealing now with a much more critical situation. And so this is the time period that we're really locked down. We're covering our windows. We're keeping as gray man and low-key incognito as we possibly can, so as to not draw any attention to us, because this is that time period that people are starting to do that. And even if they're not quite to that point, they're going to remember that you had the stuff and they didn't. And so when they get to that point of going over the edge of civility, they're going to remember that you had stuff. And so make sure you keep yourself very low key at this point, and doing your very best to not go out if at all possible, and not draw attention to you and your home or anything like that. 30 to 60 days after a major catastrophic event, assuming that things aren't starting to go back to normal, assuming that the cavalry hasn't come in to save everything and everything's been fixed, and that it's just getting worse, this is going to be probably one of the worst time periods after a major collapse, because this is where people, well, they start to lose themselves. If there's not been any resupplies, if the grid has come down, if social services, law enforcement, various community infrastructure has already started to fall away, in that first 30 to 60 days, that's when people really start to lose their civility. A lot of people already have, but the ones that just thought they never would, the good, upstanding members of society, the normal people, are starting to realize that there's only one way to survive, and that's the survival of the fittest, and the one that strikes first, and the one that's the most aggressive. And at that point, you're going to start seeing people do some pretty crazy things. This stuff happened in Venezuela during hyperinflation. This stuff happened in the Bosnian War, and in other places throughout all of Africa, Somalia, and in various other places where society basically collapsed around them. And that's what we're going to start seeing in that 30 to 60 day period. This is where it's most critical to keep yourself hunkered down. People are going to start really being hungry at this point. They've lost weight. They're going to start looking pretty tattered. And if you were prepped properly, you're not going to look that way. So you want to, part of your gray man tactics, if you're out at all, is to kind of blend in. Don't eat tons. Make sure you try to lose some weight. And even if you haven't, try to wear the biggest, baggiest clothes that you have and kind of look the part. You don't want to look all squeaky clean and looking good while everyone around you is really starting to look rough, because things have just gotten that bad. This is where you're wanting to start to be pretty critical and careful with your preps, because in those first couple of weeks, you've probably used more than you expected. I think that's just going to be normal for most people. So at this point now, you should be realizing, okay, we gotta rein it back in a little bit. We gotta really, kind of be careful of how much we use, because we don't want to overuse. You also are getting to that point of hopefully, and this for those of you that live way out, and you may not be dealing with a lot of social stresses of the societal collapse. For those of you way out in the woods, in the boonies, this is where you want to really start figuring out, okay, how are we going to make life move on in a collapse? How are we going to be planting food and harvesting our animals and going out in the woods and harvesting out there, whether it be plants or animals? And then you're also really going to be working with that community at this point. Having regular community meetings, helping each other offer security. Some of you may end up consolidating on one or two properties instead of being spread out if things have gotten really bad. And, security has become a very primary role for preppers and homesteaders, because by the 30 to 60 day mark, the people in the cities, they've realized that everything is kind of run dry there, and they're going to start going elsewhere. And that's really when the brunt of people from the cities are going to start showing up out in the counties. And even if you live quite a ways out, by the 30 to 60 day mark, they've had plenty of time to make it out to you. So that's where you want to really start being careful of the people that's going to be showing up. They're hungry. They're battle hardened, because they've lived in the city for the first 2 to 4 weeks of this collapse, and they've seen things that you probably haven't, and they're able to tolerate it. So certainly be getting ready for that. And also know that that once you hit that 30 and that 60 day mark, you're getting really close to the worst part of all this being over. Doesn't mean it's all going to be over, but just the peak of it, at least when it comes to just mass craziness of people. So definitely be ready for that part of this. It's a very important part, and it's probably overall the more dangerous part. We've become kind of comfortable, or we've gotten used to the things that have happened over the last few weeks, and it's very possible for us to let our guard down, and we certainly don't want to do that, because that's when bad things could happen to us. So I've got a bonus one for you. We're at the 90-day mark, and assuming that our scenario has been a major cataclysmic event, something like nuclear war, an EMP that's taken out the grid, or something else that's just been massively devastating, the 90-day mark may seem like it's going to be a little bit easier, and it may have the appearance that things are starting to get better. And the reason for that is that by 90 days, unfortunately, the people that aren't going to make it, that aren't going to survive, the vast majority of them have perished by the first 90 days. These are people that are medically dependent upon the system, the weak, a lot of vulnerable people that just aren't mentally capable of handling situations like this. There's just been a lot of casualties. In fact, like I said, the vast majority of the people that are going to die have probably perished in the first 90 days. So on the silver lining of that cloud is that it's going to seem like things kind of calm down for the moment, mostly just because there's a lot less people. And because there's less people, there's just less fighting in general. You're going to see less people. People have kind of calmed down. They've run out of energy. They're not eating like they once did, and they've kind of gotten into a routine of whatever that is. Now, the bad side is that the vast majority of the people that have survived in the first 90 days are either going to be people like yourself that are truly prepared for this, or, well, they're going to be the bad people, the people that have lost all sense of morality, and they will stop at nothing to survive and get what they want. The ones that are truly dangerous, this is when your marauders are going to start forming. Little gangs have really formed and set in, and they've taken territory. And in our scenario, pretty much government is just not really around. And when government is around, they're not much better than the bad guys. They may be coming in and seizing supplies if they hear that you have them. They may be coming and rounding up citizens and putting them into protective regions and quarantines. So don't always count on the government at this point to be that helpful. But the point is, and the real good point is that if you have made it to the 90-day mark, then your chances of surviving this are quite well. You're battle hardened by now. You understand what's going on, and you have a real good chance of surviving. And at this point, your community should be looking like a community should during these times. And you're working on planting, or maybe you already have, and you're really working on getting used to life after a modern civilization. And getting used to more primitive ways. This is quite likely in the 90-day mark after a major event, in an event that most likely government isn't going to come back for quite a while in modern civilization. I hope you all liked this. I understand this is a lot of it's fiction, and maybe some of it is a little extreme, but I think it can also give you a little bit of a glimpse of what could happen even if something isn't quite as extreme as these scenarios. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.